Next up, we have our presentation from WSHEMA.
Introduce myself real quickly because my name didn't get on the agenda, but my name's Darren Weaver. I'm with the Oregon Department of Transportation. So I've had the pleasure of meeting a few of you here over the last few days, but not very many of you. So, but most of you probably knew my predecessor, Bruce Erickson, with ODOT. So Bruce moved on. I come on board shortly before COVID hit all of us. So I'll be representing WSHEMA today. We elected to do our presentation a little bit different than what we've seen from the other regions so far. We're going to have updates from a number of our folks that are out here in the audience. So I think most of us are clustered together, but for the roving mic, could we get the roving mic to come with our WSHEMA group here, this little cluster group of guys? They're going to be adding some comments into the slide presentation throughout. When we talked about our presentation here, the approach we decided to take was we'd identify 4 or 5 items that were relatively hot items and topics for us in the western states. Not surprisingly to a large group here today, they're very, very similar to the hot topics that you guys have going on as well. So we apologize up front if there's a little bit of redundancy, but we're going to talk about some of the ways that we're managing our different groups through the challenges that we're all facing. So hopefully, just as we've been able to glean some expertise from you guys, hopefully we'll have a few things here or there that we're doing slightly different that you'll be able to glean and potentially utilize in your area as well. While I have the slide up here to my left and my right, obviously, we'll talk a little bit about the WSHEMA group. I mentioned that I'm relatively new to the group. We only got to meet in Colorado, and at that point, I was not even a permanent member in my position. So a little bit of a wallflower during our Colorado conference, and then of course we've been shut down and operating virtually since then. But we have had a lot of turnover in the WSHEMA group as far as leadership goes. Washington's changed, Oregon's changed, California's changed. What other ones? We had one more I thought that had changed leadership as well. Colorado as well. And so we've had a lot of turnover, but I just wanted to make a comment, take the opportunity for the folks that represent the WSHEMA group have been extremely welcoming, and with those of us who are new members, they're always there for a phone call, they're always there for an email to be able to help us. So right off the bat, although it was a little intimidating at first, I'm not going to lie, coming into Colorado just weeks into the position, these guys have been fantastic to work with, and it's great to see this as being my first national conference. It's great to see that that's nationwide. So thank you all for that hospitality. We appreciate it. These are our board members here. Most of them were able to attend, but I didn't need to read you the slides, so just make those comments while we have the slides up. How we're going to approach this here, I'm just going to facilitate the conversation, obviously, but we had some emerging themes that I touched on earlier, but we also have some specific topics that several of the states wanted to go into depth in. So we'll just be able to do that from their seat. You guys are more than welcome to come up here and relieve me if you want, but I think we talked about that earlier. But I'll go through the slides for you. We'll cover those points here just a little bit. We did want to talk a little bit about what we have in the plans. Over the last couple of days, we've heard that the different regions are planning their events for 2023. We had planned to be in 2021 in Montana, and actually another new member that I forgot to mention to WSHEMA was Walt. He just had his position not very long either, but he has agreed to take on the role of facilitating that and make sure in 2023 we're going to be able to have a face-to-face conference, God willing, in Montana. So we're looking forward to that. Okay, so topic number one that we had, again, is a theme that we've heard emerging from this conference in multiple locations, but staffing shortages. And so from an Oregon perspective, I'll just comment a little bit on what we have. Most of our candidates most of our candidate pools that we're seeing right now, we're very, very fortunate if we get 1 to 3 candidates for those positions anywhere across the state. Now we have 80 technicians, which, I guess from what I've heard kind of puts us in the middle with a lot of folks. Many have many more, but some have less. But we're just, we don't get to screen those. Our process puts all of that through HR, and HR just strictly looks at the way the positions and the qualifications are written. So they're not able to kind of take into account some of the experience that folks might have or that they touch on in their application. They just pretty much take it for black and white. And then we haven't really been able to adapt to the challenges that we're facing. As an agency, we've had some struggles with HR. So just like all of us, they're having a ton of turnover in their professional work. And so we have a lot of, I think just in the last year, we've had 4 HR recruiters assigned to fleet services. And so we're having a hard time maintaining some continuity as well. So some of the stuff that we're trying to get aggressive with is our presence on social media. We're doing our very best. I was in envy of Texas when they were talking about communications resources that were assigned to them. We're doing our best to try and get some communication resources to get out there, get a social media presence, get some videos put together, and try and regain our place as an employer of choice. Because at one point in time, well, several different times throughout my career, state employment was something that folks were seeking, but certainly right now it's not up there. So generally our focus is on outreach to folks. And we also have found some resources internally to devote to the development of an apprenticeship program. So we're really going to be focused on some kind of a bring folks in and grow your own technician kind of mentality that we're looking at. So our second topic, and then again, the parts supply issues that we're seeing, pretty self-explanatory. Everybody's seeing them, everybody's experiencing them. Generally speaking, we had some of the biggest challenges with our hydraulic components for our hydraulic systems. So we're doing our best to sit down with the vendors to just really anticipate, we're running all of our parts inventories. What do we historically utilize the most? And then we're sitting down with our vendors to have proactive conversations about just carrying these things in stock. We only have 3 parts rooms that we staff across the state. And as we go back and look through what we've historically used in the last few years the most, we're just trying to get those things in advance on the shelves as best we possibly can. And so far that's helping to manage that. I do have to say that our vendor community is meeting us halfway. They also understand that, particularly our large truck parts suppliers are meeting us, and we're having those conversations. They're agreeing to try and stock some things to help us reach our goals and to have things available for us. Like we just saw from some folks too, certainly we're holding on to our turn-in or our surplus vehicles a lot more than we typically would. It's not a great concept. We readily admit that. As parts, going and stealing something off of a piece of machinery isn't the greatest way to supplement your parts needs. But in some cases, especially as you guys all know with our specialty equipment, it's some of the only resources that we have available. Parts obsolescence is a big deal. Our fleet is really, really old, and we have a lot of equipment that you just can't flat find parts for on a good day, let alone in the times that we're living this day and age. So from Idaho, Steve had supplied some information to the challenges they're facing with their diesel particulate filters and certain generations of the Mack trucks. Steve, is there anything you want to add to that as far as just how you guys are mitigating that? And that's it's interesting, the little pockets that we see here and there where folks are having challenges getting certain things in certain areas. Sometimes it doesn't seem to have much rhyme or reason to it. One thing I did mention, or I failed to mention on our last slide, tires is not something we have ever stocked in our parts rooms or in our shops across the state. But in working with our tire vendors, again, the importance of those vendor relations. And working with our vendors, earlier this last year, they just basically told us, you guys, we have tires now, you better buy them, you better put them on stock. And so we did that at all of our shops across the state as we bought a relatively good supply of tires for our heavy trucks and our medium duty, what we call our 1 tons. So it's just kind of our core equipment that we use. And we got those in stock. And so far we've been able to fight off any real needs there through that strategy. Vehicle supply issues, again, if there was one theme of the whole conference, that may be it. I'll point out a little bit where Oregon's facing some specific challenges that we referenced in the last couple of days with some legislative requirements for us to be purchasing electric vehicles. And I plucked that little laughing emoji because that's pretty much what it is at this point. That EVs, they're only making so many of them right now, and they are definitely not targeting the vocational market. So if you want an EV, it's going to come with all the bells and whistles. So on top of that already expensive price, it's going to be real expensive, and the public perception for purchasing those nice fancy EVs just isn't going to be there. And that's even if you can get them. And so it's kind of it's nothing for us to laugh at because we are operating under mandates. Our mandates all come with a if feasible. And so we have a pretty good response for the feasibility aspect of that. We're not, if you can't get them, you can't get them. Steve, again, shared some information from Idaho. The other states are going to comment specifically here in a couple upcoming slides about their experiences. But some of the orders getting canceled, again, it's just consistent with the theme that we're seeing. Adequate funding to complete goals. I learned quickly when I came to Fleet that this was going to be, a struggle at pretty much, it has been historically a struggle, and it's just going to continue. And with inflation, it certainly hasn't. It's only exacerbated the problem. But what we're seeing in Oregon, again, I mentioned that unfunded EV mandate. So not only did they mandate that by 2025, all new light fleet purchases are going to be EVs, they didn't give us any additional money to do that. So we already know that most EVs in our light fleet are going to average $10,000 to $25,000 more, depending on what the rig is, and they didn't give us much money to do that. So we're going to be buying less vehicles, and that was before we saw the inflation hit and really feel those impacts. But on top of that, our programs are growing. We're seeing a lot of investments in AVL, telematics. All of our outside vendor costs are increasing tremendously, and we're just trying to do the best we can to manage that right now. It feels like a little bit like a freight train out of control. It's difficult and challenging to manage or to create and implement strategies with so many initiatives going on currently. One of the things, kind of tongue-in-cheek, we've been asking for innovative funding program resources to start looking at ways we can fund our programs, and that was one of the concepts that we pushed there. So we do get 10 cents for every bottle or can that we can pick up alongside the road in Oregon, so every little bit helps at this point. Much the same in Idaho. Steve and his gang are seeing those inflation costs on steel. That's been the topic in the vendor room, almost everybody that I talk to. But it varies from state to state and what we're seeing in the way our contracts are written and how much it's really hitting us. Keeping pace with technology. We have had in Oregon, again, and this is a specific problem. If you guys are experiencing it, you have my sympathies, but we've had some turnover in executive leadership, and they've came in with some really aggressive ideas and approaches and things that they wanted to implement. So along with the technology that's increasing in fleet, we're having new technology introduced into our agency through our time and management resources, our HR management. So many new programs that it's taken actually quite a bit of bandwidth of our folks just to learn these new programs. In addition to that, the two I mentioned with HR, a new HR program and a new time and materials management program. We've also had a new procurement system that's going to roll out statewide, so the way we buy things is completely changing. So again, all of that is difficult we think about our staff and our most important resource of all the people we have. We think about the challenges that they've seen these last couple years and just dealing with the changing of COVID and how it's impacted our workforce. But now these new processes and these new programs, I hear routinely from folks, it's just, I don't know how to do my job anymore, because the basic stuff of tracking your time and entering your time and has all changed. And then, of course, a lot of our, depending on how you guys are structured and the way you guys do purchases, a lot of our field technicians have essentially a Visa, a debit card, and they purchase that way. But again, now that system is completely being turned on its ear, and they're having to learn a whole new program. So change fatigue, I don't know if that's anything that you guys are hearing or going on. Most likely it is, but it's real and it's alive and well in Oregon. So some of the things we're doing to manage that, we're having to take a step back now that most of us are back in the office and the COVID impacts are starting to lessen. We're getting relatively aggressive with engagement, staff engagement. We did have a statewide employee engagement survey that rolled out right at the end of the vaccine mandates and the COVID impacts. So it showed us what we already knew. Morale was pretty low. So we're really engaging the staff to start talking aggressively about how do we catch up on training? How do we catch up on the investments that we need to make in each other that we seem to have lost over the last couple of years? So we're putting together some pretty aggressive training plans to be able to deal with that. The other technology changes that we're seeing, you guys are seeing as well in equipment. We have a lot of the crews that'll come, they'll want to order pieces of equipment from us, and they say a typical, hey, give me a tractor just like I had last time. No joke, we have some 1989, 1990, 1992 tractors, and that they don't make that tractor anymore, as everybody in this room knows. So we're finding that a lot of our maintenance folks are going to have to change or slightly modify their maintenance practices to be able to operate this new equipment. And apparently nobody told them that. That's my background. I have 15 years in our maintenance and operations program prior to coming to Fleet, so I get it. I can relate to them. It's tough to change. We tend to be one of stuck in our ways. But we're having to create little one-on-one groups ahead of time, which was something we didn't have in our procurement practices before. So everybody, I'll use the tractors as an example. Everybody who ordered a tractor this biennium, we got together on a Teams meeting and we walked through in great detail the changes from the old technology of the generation of tractors that each of them was assigned to the tractors and the technology that's available today. And then we kind of had to anticipate how that might change the practices. And it's a difficult conversation to have with those folks because they want to say, this is the way we do it, and your job is to buy us something that helps us do it the way we want to do it. And so it's not quite working that way, but we're having to create opportunities to have that discussion with them to help identify a path forward where we can get you something that's going to work for you, but you might have to change a little bit. So our motto there has just kind of been, you don't have to like our answers, but you won't be surprised. And so that is something we're going to continue to roll into as we roll into our next biennium of purchases. And Jeff can take over for a few slides here. And Jeff
Casper from the Utah Department of Transportation. Good morning. Glad to be here. We're all in person again. Some of the shortages or some of the problems we've been having specifically in Utah, after being at this conference, I kind of feel better. We're not doing near as bad as some of you guys. Currently, we're down 8 mechanics statewide, which we have about 75 when we're fully staffed. So not terrible, mostly in the Salt Lake area. I think a lot of it is due to pay. Obviously, we get guys in there that if they know quite a bit about what they're doing, our local dealerships will snap them up pretty quick. We have had openings for, as it says, as of March 29th, we've had an opening, or at least I think 7 openings, and haven't had any applicants whatsoever. So we don't really have the HR problem. We have nobody wants to work there type problems. Another thing I think we're having problems with retention is 69% of our mechanics are below mid-range. Once you get inside our system, there's not a great way to give you huge raises. We can give them a few incentives, but it's not an hourly wage. So they're leaving. Young kids, they don't care so much about the benefits and the retirement. They care more about the pay. We're trying to get that higher. We're trying to create different classifications so we can pay them more if they do more or they know more. As of yet, not much has changed.
I'll chime in. One thing I forgot to say with our group, Jeff, was that recently our union just negotiated a letter of agreement for us to be able to give hiring bonuses now, because so many external companies are giving hiring bonus for technicians or similar positions. So we just got that approved while I was traveling here within this last week. So we'll see how that helps.
Yeah, let me know. If anything else, if you got some of the language, we could pass on to our HR people.
Yeah, it's actually a relatively simple letter of agreement, actually. So
our pay range at UDOT ranges from about $18.91 for a starting out mechanic to about $28.37 with 4 years experience. So we have our sister agency, which is UTA, the transit buses. We were checking into their pay, and they start out about the same at $18.52. They max out at $33.61. And the thing we thought was interesting, at UTA, you can have no experience. You know what a wrench is. You may not know how to use it. They'll start you out at $18.52. Within 1 year, you can get, if you go through all their schooling and training, you can be up to the $33.61. And typically a UDOT personnel, it takes you 30 years to get from the 18 to the 28. And that takes some additional raises and, an act of God to get you from beginning to the end in 30 years. So we've lost a bunch of people to our sister agency, UTA, as well. Okay, our part supply chain issues, obviously it's causing our costs to go up. I can't remember exactly what we bought. I think it was an A-arm for a Dodge truck. We ended up paying $1,500 for one A-arm. It was the only one in the Salt Lake Valley. We needed it now. Normally that's not even close to that cost, but We're just having to pay it to keep our fleet rolling. UDOT orders on average about 130 light-duty vehicles per year. This year we're getting 8, maybe. One thing a little more unique to Utah is it's not necessarily they're not building the trucks, Ford's not building the trucks or Dodge. It's more in Utah we can't pay full retail. And our dealerships are telling us, why would we sell to you at a discounted price when we can get full retail? We've been quoted recently a 230-day delivery on our wing plows. This is causing us to run out of money, kind of like Angel was saying the other day. He's faced with losing some of his funding due to not being able to get the equipment delivered. We're starting to push some of our vehicles into next year and try and roll the funding over because of such the long delays. We've had our 4 international trucks. We buy mostly Mack in Utah, but we ordered 4 international trucks. They were last February. They're gonna get delivered this July, so over a year. And they came to us and said they wanted $4,000 per truck more in order to give them to us. Fortunately, procurement is gonna allow us to do it, but definitely not, we didn't have the budget for it, so we're gonna have to cut something else in order to pay for them.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of luck with finding very few vehicles off the lot. We're allowed, we've asked for allowance to be able to pay the price that they're asking retail in lieu of, dumping money into stuff that's already past its life cycle. So we're getting some limited approval for that, but we still have to be careful what the trim packages look like.
Right.
All chromed out.
Keeping up with the changing technology, again, it seems like we're constantly putting our mechanics through school. Hard part about that is once you get them trained, the dealership will come in, pay them twice the money, and we're ended up starting over again. We do have a multitude of different softwares. We've been trying to keep with the Mack trucks lately. We're getting some pushback from our regions. They don't like Mack trucks in certain regions, so we're having to get more Cummins software, international software from a bunch of different manufacturers. As Troy was telling you the other day, there's this Alltel software that we've been trying. It's not as specific as the truck manufacturer software, but it does at least get you pointed in the right direction. That's certainly helped us. The other problem we have is procurement. It doesn't allow us just to go out and buy software. Enough funding to complete the goals. UDOT set a goal that we're gonna have a 10-year life cycle on our trucks. That's about 50 trucks a year. This last year, we had 43 placeholders from Mack, and they ended up cutting us to 27. I don't see that getting any better in the next few years. It also affects the rest of the fleet. We got a pretty nice plow truck fleet, but you don't have, the loaders, graders, farm tractors, all that's definitely falling apart due to not being able to fund them.
Well, thank you, Jeff. We're going to have you hand the mic over to Brad. Brad's going to take us through, this is one of my favorite photos, Brad, I think you've ever floated by us right here.
I got lots more. I didn't bring that many today. So.
I like it.
My name's Brad Bilesma. I'm the fleet manager for the state of Alaska, and we'll go through, again, the 5 areas that have taken most of our attention in the western states. We kind of agreed on all this stuff, and so again, some of this will be a little bit of repeat. Staffing issues, the same that all you folks have. We have we have 125 technician positions. About 25 of those are what we call single-man shops. They don't work completely on their own. They work with the road maintenance crews or the airport maintenance crews, but it's a single mechanic or technician or fleet employee there. And quite a few of those, of course, are in the more remote areas. There's just no local talent or no local interest in those positions. So what we're doing is a lot of those positions we're staffing them as week on, week off, or 2 week on and 2 week off positions. We can recruit from Anchorage or Fairbanks or any of the larger towns. You can live wherever you want, and then we transport you to work, and we house you. So while that opens up the talent pool in the number of people that might be interested, it's very expensive to fly somebody to work for a week and then fly them back and then house them while they're there. Parts supply issues, same thing. Our tire dealers are telling us get them now because their supplies are going to dry up this summer. We're doing the same thing, keeping rather than disposing of equipment, we're keeping a lot of it and cannibalizing it everybody has the idea in the back of their mind is that when we can get parts, we'll put them back on, and then they'll be whole, and then they'll be worth more to sell, but I kind of don't think that's going to happen. Something we do in Alaska a lot, we make something out of nothing, so we're turning to a lot of local machine shops and the plastic shops and any of the parts, UHMW, anything that we can have machined locally, or we can give them a template. We're just we're trying to find ways to do that. Obviously, that is not the case for your more precision or your more technical or your electronic stuff. But anything that we can get cut or made locally, we've been trying to do that. Vehicle supply issues. They're not a whole lot new here. We are. I forget who was mentioning this earlier. We're not a biennium state. We have an annual budget, and we can't commit FY23 money until actual fiscal year 23. So we're running into the same thing where we are unable to commit or give a purchase order for using money that we don't have access to yet. So we are running into struggles there and haven't been able to work around that yet. So July 1st, our procurement staff is going to be working overtime, just piling in orders as soon as we get access to that money. Light duty assets, again, we're trying to order ahead, order pickups and SUVs that we don't even know where they're gonna go yet. The problem is, same as all of you, Ford has told us that 80 of our 100 trucks are not being built. Chevy told us the same thing. Having a very difficult time. It's nothing new there, but it's kind of the same thing that they're telling you, Jeff. In a different way, they're telling us the same thing. Why would we sell to you when we can sell every one of these trucks at retail price? So running into that same thing and fighting it up the chain as much as we can with Ford and Chevy reps rather than the dealers. But it's I don't know that we're making any progress there.
So one thing that's slightly different in Oregon, I'll just add, we have had some luck with committing. We're a biennial state, so we have had some luck with pre-ordering. It's kind of a gray area. People don't really love it, but we've been able to convince them that that's the only way we're going to survive. Yeah. So the challenge you have to sit down with your vendors, and we have to explain to them because they just don't understand our budgeting cycle. But sitting down with them ahead of time and explaining that, it'd be really good if you had some rigs on the lot June 30th, and you may get some of our money, but if you don't, then we're going to buy them in July 1, so, but they don't understand that. But having those upfront conversations, that sometimes they have some wiggle room that they didn't disclose.
What we're finding there, I think everybody's found that in the last 2 years within state government, just about all rules are flexible and everything's got a little wiggle room. What we're finding is the procurement officials are the least flexible, or the least, and so they're we're trying to wear them down, and we're getting there.
We wait for turnover and hit the new weak ones.
Yeah, right. Yeah, turnover, and then it's an empty chair, and then we can do whatever we want. Adequate funding, for the most part, we have done pretty well. It's been a hard-fought battle over the last couple of years to increase our capital funding. The challenge that we're having is really not listed here, is we think that all of the increases in capital funding that we're getting are just going to be swallowed up with the increases in prices. So while it looks like we've doubled our capital spending, we're not getting double the fleet replacement, or double the replacement of the fleet. We're a little worried that all the efforts to increase funding that we have access to is not going to have the same impact, and so that's going to be perceived as a not having the impact that was expected from the stakeholders that granted us that ability. We do technology issues. We have, I think I mentioned this the other day, we've had a couple of our equipment vendors that have severely restricted, equipment manufacturers that restricted our ability to get access to diagnostic software at all, to the point where they wanted to, they want to control and push out the updates using their own technicians and their own software, and not giving us access to that. And simply put, it doesn't work for any of us. But in Alaska, it doesn't work at all when the equipment is easily 500 miles away from the dealer, and who knows what number in line for them to repair or come out and see them. So we have started writing our contracts to require that we have the ability to, that we will have access to diagnostic software, at least be able to do our own regens, at least be able to do our own updates and things like that. And so that's resulted in a couple of different vendors just being out of the question for us, but is a good thing. We have a issue right now with a certain engine manufacturer that we're not able to get access to their software, and that's just going to result in you're not going to be able to bid that engine or that manufacturer. Not a good way to make friends in the vendor community, and our vendor community is, our dealer community is very small, but it's just a reality of where we are at with how we do business. We have to be able to, and all of us have to be able to keep our equipment running, and we can't be restricted to every time there's a check engine light or whatever, the dealer has to come out. It's just not feasible for us. So that's where one of the places where technology we run into real issues there.
Okay, so I want to thank you guys for sharing the burden with me. Before I have one last little topic that's not in the 5 hot topics that we'll cover here, but in addition to the challenges, I just wanted to touch on one thing here. A little bit of a success story, but it's a little early on to call complete success yet. But we undertook an effort to update our, what we just call them our 10-yard trucks, update our 10-yard truck spec. And that began really before the impacts of COVID started to hit us. But it had been quite some time since we had revisited the spec. We had kind of done the same thing for generation after generation after generation. And so we really wanted to kind of remodel, strip it down. We were different times, call for different answers, different solutions. So looking at our fleet, it was very, very clear that we're not going to be able to maintain what we had been doing. So some things had to change. So we undertook that in 2019, like I said, just prior to the COVID impacts. That slowed us down a little bit. We really wanted to spend some time with the process, and so ended up having to do some of that virtually. Was a little bit impactful, but we got most of it wrapped up before we really got COVID got the stranglehold on us. But as we undertook the project, you'll see the bullet points there that we really wanted to focus on. Improve the weight management, largely speaking, and this is not discrediting anybody who worked on these projects prior to me and our current group of folks, but largely weight management wasn't given much of a thought in the way we built these trucks. It was just like, we want this, we want this, we want this, we're going to go out, we're going to load them, we're not going to worry about what they weigh. It's all good. So we really wanted to focus on the weight management aspect of this, just from a longevity standpoint. We're having to keep these rigs a lot longer than we wanted to, so we need to be able to make sure that they're going to handle the load and the abuse that we're going to give them, and not just kind of set weight management aside, because we were seeing a lot of premature failures on things such as wheels and other components because of the lack of foresight around weight management. Obviously, safety is always one of the one of the things we want to focus on. We wanted to focus on that. Reducing customization. There were a lot of things that, I don't know if you guys experienced this or not, but ODOT thinks we're special in a lot of ways. The other ODOT in the room thinks we're special in a lot of ways. And so we had custom bumpers that, they weren't an off-the-shelf type product. These things were made specifically for us, and we were the only ones running them in most cases. And so we really wanted to strip away some of that customization and just let the bidders and the vendors come to us with their modern solutions so we could weigh them and see where we wanted to go forward. And then streamline the purchase and deployment. You're going to see a little later in a slide here that when coming on board, again, I told you my background's in maintenance and operations, and that was my number one complaint as a maintenance manager, is that why does it take fleet so long to get me my equipment? That was still the number one complaint when I came into fleet, and we heard that. So we were working on that as kind of another strategic project that we had, and we wanted to weave that into our process. We control the procurement process, we control the contract. Let's write this in so that we can streamline our receive to deploy timeline and help ourselves out a little bit. Our prior contracts, we were purchasing the chassis and the body from a vendor, And then we had contracts set up to go buy the spreader units and the plows, and then we managed the vendor contracts for those installs. And as you guys can all imagine, I'm sure, when you got that many different vendors, that many different installs, it's always come back to us to be inspected, to make sure that it's meeting our specs, and it's going to another vendor, then it's coming back and being inspected again. And then whenever you run into a process, it's like, oh, it's not my plow, it's your truck. It's not my truck, it's your sander, so it was difficult. So we wanted to address that, and then repeatability was a big concern as well. Our first initial step was really to get engaged some folks in our staff that had not been that engaged in the past, which is our regional repair managers. And I know we're all structured differently, but we have 3 regional shop locations across the state, and these 3 individuals manage those shops. So we went in detail through the old specifications and says, where we're calling out specifics here, is this something that you really feel we need to call out a specific, or can we open this up and see what the vendors come to us with solutions? And in most cases, very rarely did we need to have specifics. In most cases, we could open it up and let the vendors bring solutions to us. There was a lot of wants in our old contract. In some people's minds, I'm sure they were needs or have-to-haves, but we were able to identify a lot of wants that folks had in there. Then we decided to go with a turnkey truck concept, and what I've learned since then is a lot of different ways that DOTs build trucks across the United States. We wanted this truck to roll into our lot with that goal of streamlining our production and delivery process. We wanted it to roll on the lot essentially ready for us to inspect and deploy. So the truck contract now is set up so that they're delivered with everything. They have the spreader unit installed, they have the plows installed. Basically, we just inspect them and then they're ready to roll out. And we know that everything's going to work, so we don't have that shuffle between different bodybuilders and different vendors. And again, if you guys are handcuffed in your purchase and procurement laws by this, I'm really, really sorry, but we are able to use the best value and go out for RFPs. And so we can weigh a lot of factors and build a scoring criteria of how we're going to score these. And also different from what I've heard many say is the longevity of our contracts. Our procurement folks actually like that. I actually feel very strongly that that works to our benefit. It's a demonstration of a commitment to a vendor, which, put yourself in their shoes, they're going to want to see that from you. But also the way it's structured with an annual update, we can get out. If at any point we feel like we're in a place where we're not benefiting ourselves or the citizens that we represent, that annual update allows us to get out of that, and then of course we can go out for another RFP. I'm going to cut right to the chase. It was an exhausting process, and part of that internally, and again, this is nothing about any of the staff that has worked on this before or the staff that worked on it currently, but the most difficult thing for us was to step away from our old practices and be comfortable enough to face these new ones with an open mind and say, well, there is a little bit of unknown in some instances. But if we just keep staying married to the same old plow bumper and the same old plow style, we're going to continue to pay that customization cost. And I can only imagine what that would be now in this day and age with the prices of materials. I'll cut right to the chase. As a result, we had a mandatory pre-bid, which is also something, if you're going to do an RFP style solicitation, I would highly encourage that. It gives everybody an opportunity to get in the room, have a nice, open, collaborative conversation. And for you, from a purchaser standpoint, you know who your players are going to be. In our case, it was kind of the usual suspects, so to speak, that were in the room that day. But it was a relatively successful pre-bid conference, although we were asking the vendors to do a tremendous amount of work on their end, which was much different than what they had experienced. So there was a lot of concern expressed and some grief and some strong, passionate feelings, I would say. Probably the best way to put it. So where did we end up? I will mention we only have 4 trucks on the ground. While we undertook most of this process prior to COVID hitting us, the actual realization of the project and the realization of new trucks under this contract, COVID just come in and slammed us, along with some other challenges that hit us along the way. But one of the things that this is also helping us to do is to move towards standardized trucks. We had, again, a lot of different configurations based on what people wanted. But for the 3 standard configurations that we have that we primarily purchased, those are the cost savings that we're able to realize. And I'm going to say that, and I just want to throw this out there. This is prior to all of the increases. So this was apples to apples, what we were paying on our last contract, what the prices came in with this new contract, and we all know what's happened since then. But I wouldn't be able to compare apples to apples if I added all that in. So we did realize some pretty significant savings, and we were able to get 4. Right now, currently, we have 4 out on the ground, and we're running them through the paces. So like I said, there's still some learning that we have to do, still some fine tuning with the truck contract itself. But the willingness of the prime contractor on this and to work with us, and the staff to step out of their comfort zone and to explore something that we really hadn't done in the past is paying off and benefits. And you talk about that number 1 complaint that I mentioned we'd readdress here on a slide. The deployment kind of speaks for itself. All that shuffle that we used to take us 100+ days to go through our deployment process from the day we actually received the truck. And these first 4 trucks have been out in just roughly a month for the most part, which our customers are taking note of, and they're really, really happy about that. So I know that probably here we are, probably some questions on that, but there's also probably some reluctance about asking those questions. But any thoughts, comments? Anybody else having success with a similar approach? Okay, well, from the Western States group, I just wanted to say thank you guys for the support. Again, being my first opportunity to be here, I heard from all the seasoned guys that this was going to be great. It's worth your time. It's worth your investment in being here. I can absolutely wholeheartedly tell you that it is. So I appreciate the support. Really appreciate all the presentations and the effort that went into them. And from the Western States, thank you guys all for the work of hosting us and allowing us some time to present our material today.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.